Four-time NBA All-Star, Olympic gold, an $87 million contract. And then, alcohol, a destroyed career, and nearly all of his fortune gone. Vin Baker ended up back in his parents' house when almost nothing was left of his former life. Then, the former four-time All-Star started working at Starbucks. How did an NBA star end up like this? Where did his millions disappear? And how did he manage to come back after losing practically everything? Watch until the end. The finale of this story is not what you expect. If, like me, you enjoy looking back at the great NBA legends of past decades, and you're interested in their true stories and little-known facts that are rarely talked about, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps the channel grow and makes it possible to bring you more videos like this. Thank you. Now, let's continue. In the 1990s, Vin Baker was exactly the kind of player any NBA team wanted. Tall, powerful, skilled big man who could score, battle for rebounds, and lead his team. 4 times in a row, he was named an All-Star. He played for the United States national team and became an Olympic champion. Then he signed a contract worth roughly $87 million. It seemed like his future was set for years to come. But a few years later, almost nothing was left of that career. Baker lost his spot on the roster, faced serious problems with alcohol, lost a huge portion of his earnings, and at one point found himself in his parents' house, where, by his own admission, he saw almost no way out of his situation. And yet this story is interesting not only for its fall, because Vin Baker managed to do what not every person who hits rock bottom can do. He started over from scratch. And he didn't start on the basketball court or with a new multi-million-dollar contract. His comeback began with a job at Starbucks. But before getting to that point, you need to understand just how high Baker rose. In 1993, the Milwaukee Bucks selected him with the 8th overall pick in the draft. For a young player, that was a great start, but no one could guarantee at the time that a few years later he would become one of the league's biggest stars. Baker quickly proved otherwise. He had a rare combination of physical attributes and skill. At about 6 feet 11 inches, he could play with his back to the basket, attack from several feet out, battle for rebounds, and create his own shot when needed. Within a few seasons, he became the leader of Milwaukee. In the 1994-95 season, Baker received his first All-Star invitation. 3 more followed. From 1995 to 1998, he was named to the All-Star game 4 times in a row. For a player who had only recently entered the NBA, this was a meteoric rise. He became more and more famous. The contracts grew bigger. The pressure increased as well. In 1997, Baker landed with the Seattle Supersonics. They expected even more from him there. The team already had a true star in Gary Payton, and after Shawn Kemp's departure, Baker's role became especially important. He was supposed to become one of the team's key players, and for a while, it actually worked. In the 1997-98 season, Baker was again invited to the All-Star game. That was his 4th consecutive All-Star selection. He remained one of the most prominent big men in the NBA and looked like a man just entering the prime of his career. But after Seattle's playoff loss, the situation began to gradually change. The NBA lockout in the 1998-99 season was especially hard on Baker. There were no games, no normal routine. The pressure disappeared only on the surface, and there was much more free time. And that was when alcohol started taking up more and more space in his life. At first, it might have looked like a way to unwind after a hard day. Then drinking became more frequent. Gradually, it stopped being an occasional thing and turned into a problem that Baker could no longer control. The most dangerous part was something else. His basketball career continued. From the outside, people could still see an NBA star. But inside, the situation was already completely different. Baker began to gain weight. His physical condition deteriorated, his performance declined. His attitude toward training changed. What once came naturally became increasingly difficult. And it was during this period that Seattle offered him a contract that was supposed to change his financial future forever. The amount was roughly $87 million over 7 years. For the NBA of the late 1990s, that was enormous money. On paper, everything looked perfect. A young star gets a massive contract and is supposed to spend his best years with one organization. But the money didn't stop the problems. On the contrary, the contrast became even sharper. Baker had millions, fame, and the status of one of the best players of his generation. At the same time, he was handling his own issues worse and worse. His play continued to decline. And then came an event that could have been a new pinnacle. In 2000, Baker was named to the United States Olympic team for the Sydney Games. He won a gold medal. For any basketball player, that is a monumental achievement, and Baker truly became an Olympic champion. But after returning to the NBA, the problems didn't go away. His numbers kept dropping. His weight became an increasingly serious issue. His former speed and effectiveness gradually faded. In 2002, Baker ended up with the Boston Celtics. For the team, this was a chance to acquire a former star who might still return to a high level. But in Boston, they quickly saw just how serious the situation had become. Baker no longer looked like the player who had been selected to 4 straight All-Star games. His physical condition raised questions. Alcohol was interfering more and more with his professional life. At some point, hiding the problem became impossible. And then Baker said the words that finally changed how people saw what was happening. He admitted that he had alcoholism. This was no longer just about declining stats and a bad contract. Before, the team stood a man who needed help. Baker went to rehab. It seemed like that could be the start of a comeback. He tried to recover and get back on the court, but overcoming addiction turned out to be far more difficult than just deciding to stop drinking. After Boston came other teams, the New York Knicks, the Houston Rockets, and then the Los Angeles Clippers. His career path grew shorter and shorter. Once Baker had been one of the NBA's top players. Now he was moving from team to team, trying to hold on to at least some of his former status. In 2006, his professional career came to an end. And then it turned out that retiring from basketball was only half the problem. A few years earlier, Baker had enormous wealth. Now his financial situation looked completely different. His life was no longer about flights, practices, games, and multi-million-dollar contracts. The familiar routine was gone. The team was gone. The feeling that there would be another game tomorrow was gone. Along with that, his problems with alcohol continued. In 2011, Baker ended up in his parents' house in Old Saybrook. Later, he spoke about this period with brutal honesty. He had almost lost the direction his life was supposed to take. There was almost no money left. There was no basketball career anymore. No former status either. It was then that he decided to try rehab one more time. This time, everything was different. April 17, 2011, became an important turning point for Baker. He began the path to sobriety and gradually started regaining control over himself. But ahead of him was an entirely unexpected twist. The former 4-time All-Star, Olympic champion, and holder of a multi-million-dollar contract decided to work at Starbucks. For anyone who remembered Baker in his prime, this image seemed almost unbelievable. A player once surrounded by thousands of fans and television cameras was now standing behind a coffee shop counter. But this job helped him get used to a simple life again. Not the life of a star, an ordinary life. Baker relearned responsibility, discipline, and daily work. He could no longer count on another NBA contract to save him. he had to save himself. And gradually, it worked. He kept working on himself, placed great importance on faith and family, and then began returning to basketball. Only now his goal was completely different, not to score baskets, to help others. In the end, Baker found himself back with the Milwaukee Bucks, the very organization that had once selected him with the 8th overall pick. Only this time, he didn't come as a young player predicted to have a great future. He came as a man who had already lost nearly everything and managed to start over. By 2022, Baker was celebrating 11 years of sobriety and working as an assistant coach for the Milwaukee Bucks. And that, perhaps, is the main point of his story. His greatest comeback was not a new contract or a return to the NBA. The most important victory came when basketball could no longer solve his problems. Vin Baker rose very high. Then he rapidly lost almost everything he had built. But his story didn't end there. He was able to regain control over his own life. If you're interested in real stories of NBA stars who went through rises, tragic periods, and unexpected turns of fate, be sure to watch other videos on our channel. Links will appear on screen right now.